Not good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. There's two WA people here, I realise. Viv. Barbara's from WA as well.
Yes.
Two Sandgropers.
I know.
Oh, how exciting. Okay, find your mat. I feel like I'm half evolved when I go to conferences or something like this and I take a photo of a notes page. I never then do anything with it. So it's like I get halfway there, I do it. Then I'm flicking through my phone looking at all photos and I see all these scribbled notes. I never actually go back and look at them. So it's only half evolution, isn't it? Is there hope for me, Dan? From a technology point of view? No. Just can't carry it out. Okay, find a way to come down to lying on your back, if you're not already there. So I'll talk to you now while you're in this receptive state, captive audience. So today's plan is we'll do ATM and explorations before morning tea. After morning tea will be the ATM panel. So you've got all the questions you've always been too afraid to ask. Now you can, of 4 expert ATM teachers. After lunch, Jenny will do the practice development session, and then we'll finish with another ATM with Fran, which will be delicious. Not to set up expectations, but you know it will be, so just say it. Could be challengingly delicious. So you can check in with how you are this morning. And again, we'll come back to this theme of muscle tonus. So you might first go to your emotional tonus, like we did on the very beginning last Sunday, Sunday of this week. And there might be sort of a pervasive or a background kind of valence is another word for it. When something's got an emotional tone, it's the sort of valence. I like that word, actually. Valence, V-A-L-E-N-C-E, valence. Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes. What did I say yesterday that I said the wrong way around? Oh, fela. Okay. So what's the valence? And you can get quite intricate about how you sense your emotional tonus, in that it manifests somewhere at a sort of physiological level, like you are experiencing it in your body. It's not like mosquitoes buzzing around your head. It's not kind of, or that smudgy thing that hovers around. Who's that character in Peanuts who's just always kind of dirty and cross? And you can see that his emotional valence because he's got this kind of cloud around him. Well, it's not like that for us. We might generate that kind of cloud, but you actually experience it, don't you? Often in your gut, but it could be somewhere else. It could manifest elsewhere. So this is a lifelong quest, starting to in a sense, step back from the emotion and where it carries you and sit with how you experience it. And experiencing it as a cluster of sensations. I find this extremely intriguing. So I invite you to join me on this lifelong quest. But you'd have to do it on your own. So you can join me, but you still be on your own. So let's say you're feeling slightly happy. Let's say. So those are, where would that manifest? You know, where would it be apparent? Or maybe that kind of pervasive emotional tonus is slightly sad, or it might be more of an overt physical state, like you just might be feeling tired. And you don't feel sad tired, you don't feel happy tired, you're just tired. Or is it overwhelmed, which has a flavour of frustration? Or you might have a vague irritability, which again has that flavour of frustration, that if it was amplified, like if you turned up the dial on an irritation, it could become a little bit angry. You might have a worry, which again is like this little irritation. How does a worry manifest? Now, there's the obvious thing, isn't it? There's that sort of mentation, thinking activity in your brain, which can feel like the buzzing mosquitoes. Does it manifest elsewhere? And again, you might obviously go to your gut, but you might get a sense in your throat or in your sinuses, or it might even be in your fingertips or your feet, or, you know, don't limit where you scan for the influence of these, or the manifestation, I should say, of these emotional states. There might be a little anxiety feeling, you know, that's sort of on the fear kind of spectrum. So here's the thing, you're not examining the cause-effect business. You're not going into the, why do I feel like this? It's not the why, it's how do I feel this? And it's very, very different. Just like in ATM with the movements, you're sensing how I do this, not why, because, you know, why? I always say to my clients, think of 4 reasons why that's happening, and then don't stop. Because there'll be at least 4 reasons. Why have I got this pain? Everyone wants to know, why have I got this pain? Why have I got this? Why have I got that? There's always a multitude. It's always a series of factors. So the why is difficult. Let's just stick with the how. How do I feel this? Where do I feel this? What do I feel with this? And then link this with muscle tonus, because of course I've talked about them like they're 2 separate things, but you're starting to maybe get the experience that they're not. So if you felt very happy, some of you might, how would that influence your muscle tonus? How would you lie on the floor if you felt really happy? Now, could you fake it? Could you do that? Could you lie on the floor as if you're really happy? What would change in the, you know, all those words we used to describe the liveliness of the muscle, or the activity, or the tone in the muscles, their readiness to move? Could you quietly adjust yourself so that you would be more likely to feel happy than something else? And then what's happy? I mean, there's that quiet sort of smug happy, isn't there? Or there's that tingling anticipation happy. So, you know, I haven't told you which happy. You can choose which happy. And then what would happen to your muscle tonus if you were in that tired? You know, so it's not so emotional, it's just physically tired. How would that? Could you fake that? This is the fake it till you make it session. Could you fake being tired? Or is that just really innate? What would happen to your muscle tone? What would happen? What would flop? I'm presuming that people flop when they're tired, but maybe, you know, you can get overtired and you're kind of overwrought. You might have gone there. So how do you know when you're tired? And it might be as simple as my eyelids feel really heavy. Well, that's muscle tonus change, isn't it? Because eyelids are moved by the tone in the muscles around the eyes. Those sphincter ones that Fran talked about a couple of days ago. Well, there's levator ones as well. The closing ones, there's all sorts. But so even droopy eyelids. And if you get really tired, then you start feeling your facial muscles go slack and you'll start getting a delightful bit of dribble coming out the corner of your mouth because the tone in your facial muscles has dropped so much. Now, there's a beautiful feeling, isn't it? Am I sharing too much? I think so. Okay. Leave it at that. And then we were talking about the soft palate. We'll just say that soft palate can relax. So that's muscle tonus as well, right? That, the jaw dropping back that we mentioned yesterday. Because those jaw muscles let go. Now, for some people, they let go and they sleep, and some people, they ramp up. You know, people who have bruxism, that teeth grinding. And interestingly, when we were looking at all the sort of higher level trials using Feldenkrais, actually a trial that came up that stacked up quite well was with children with bruxism, teeth grinding, doing Feldenkrais, and they got better. Yes.
What was that again, Susan? Because my daughter, she grinds her teeth really bad.
Yeah, so it's the jaw muscles, instead of relaxing like all the other muscles when we're asleep. You know, particularly when people are dreaming, they grind their teeth like they're kind of processing stuff. My sister's cracked all her teeth. She has to have all this work done. She's been doing it for decades. Your daughter's not there yet. But yeah, it's this kind of muscle tone here, you know, and whether they're just replaying some anxiety thing. It's not a diagnosis of anxiety by any stretch, but it's manifests as that kind of, you know, that, and you'll see them working, their face will be working. So in this study, and I don't know the details, they did a lot of ATM work. I think it was ATM, not FI, with the children. And their grinding got less. By the parental reports were that the grinding got less because kids don't know they're doing it. Yeah, just really the gentle awareness stuff, but general. I'll try and find the paper for you, Pat, but it was a general. It wasn't, my memory is it wasn't fancy Feldenkrais, it was bog standard, but I'll get back to you about that. Yeah, very interesting, Carol. Oh, okay, so the tonus in the heart, yeah. So the cardiac muscle cells are slightly different to skeletal muscle cells, but they still contract. And they're under autonomic control, so they're not voluntary like skeletal muscles. But yes, you can feel them. And you can feel when they work collectively, obviously, you feel the beat, you know, you feel the contraction of your heart, and it has a double contraction, or it has, actually isn't it a triple contraction, isn't it? Sort of, it contracts in a sort of a squeezy motion in a sequence to get the heart blood out, in and out. Gosh, you're really taxing my physiology. But yeah, so you can feel that. And we don't feel, I mean, the heart doesn't go into a state of really low tone because that would be difficult. But what it does is slows its rate of contraction. And it can slow its strength of contraction, of course, because you can really feel your heart pound, you know, that pounding. And it feels like it's absolutely banging, but it goes with that strength and the rate. It's very interesting. Actually, I'll tell you another interesting story about cardiac muscle cells. So this is one of these sort of stories that comes out of the new way of thinking about control of movement, is this idea that we can self-organise. We don't need this kind of hierarchical reflex theory stuff. They found that if you put individual cardiac muscle cells in a Petri dish, they will start beating in time. So there's no nervous system, there's no orchestrator. Yeah, there's some kind of group mentality amongst cardiac cells. So, you know, when you do those ATMs and you all roll together, your little cardiac cells in my head, that's what I look at you and all think, oh, they're all beating in time, more or less. That's a good question. I don't know. I presume so. I don't know, though. Good question. Someone asked if they were all from the same person. So there's this, and it's the same kind of chaos theory, self-organisation principles. You know, the way water molecules in the air will form recognisable, reproducible patterns of clouds depending on the conditions. So with that kind of thinking, they say that there are control parameters, like the control parameters for the formation and movement of clouds is, you know, air temperature, moisture content, height, etc. So there's no, you know, brace yourself, but there's no God or nervous system organising the cloud formations. They self-organise into those recognisable patterns, reproducible kind of recognisable patterns, with variation, obviously. And it's self-organising, so there's no higher authority. It's great for democracy, isn't it? Didn't work in Britain. So what happened to your muscle tonus when I started talking theory? What happened, if you were interested, what happened to your muscle tone? You know, your ears pricked up, right? So the muscle tone in your ear muscles increased. You don't have any ear muscle. Well, you can wiggle your scalp. If you were disinterested, what happened to your muscle tone? These things can be extraordinarily subtle. And can you pick them up in yourself and therefore start picking them up in other people? You know, when you're with somebody who seems to be really empathetic, they pick up on this stuff in you. So it's observable. It's sensible. And of course it can be faked, those of you who are in the theatre or wannabes, like some of us. And I've talked so much that my computer switched off. It's impatient. Okay, so with this idea that you've got a snapshot of emotional tonus, and now we're starting to link emotional tonus with muscle tonus so that these two things are not separate. Right? They're not two separate systems operating in isolation. They are subsystems within your system. Could you roll your subsystems up into sitting? Bring all of you. Actually, you can leave your emotional shit on the mat, actually. Yeah, yes you can. Yes you can. And cross your legs. And notice which leg is in front of the other. So which ankle, so it's at the ankle level, isn't it? So the shin is in front of the other. And we do this a lot, and I catch myself doing it too. People, you know, the teacher will say, okay, change over your legs and feel the difference. And you do it. You do the mechanics, but do you actually do it in, you know, in your sense? Maybe, maybe not. So swap over and feel the difference, so slowly. And you might feel the difference in terms of a discomfort, or it might be an unfamiliarity. And those two things can go together too. But again, have some knowledge in the awareness about why you make the decisions that you do. And it's not particularly a judging, this is a bad way or something, it's just different. How is it different? You can find one thing, find a second thing. You can go back again. It's so scientific, right, this method. Cake. I was feeling a little bit peckish. Thank you, Bruce. I do want to know the best cooks though, because then that your phones are the ones I want to turn on. Okay, and now everybody sit with your right leg in front. So much for individuality. And put your hands behind you. Rest on your hands. And now, just straighten your right leg out in front of you a little bit. Take it in the direction of straight. And back again. Keep going, just doing that a few times. And how you deal with this problem, this puzzle of the friction of your heel on the floor. What happens in the rest of you? Where does your weight go to help you? Do you hold your breath to get the push? Do you have to hold your breath to get the push? When your right leg's stretched out, maybe just take your left leg out as well. And is that the same? Or is that easier? Does it have something to follow? Next time your legs are bent up again, could you use your hands to take your legs out one at a time? And track this gently, slowly. How would you do that? How does this change the way you shift your weight? Could you imagine, in a somewhat dissociated kind of way, that this is the leg of your partner from yesterday? And could you move your leg with the kind of care and awareness that you moved the other person's leg? And can you feel a change in tonus in your legs? How would you feel that change? If your legs have to be somewhat passive, right? They are carried. So it's almost impossible to, switch them off and make them completely floppy. You guys actually get quite good at it, allowing yourself to be moved passively. So you're very good at reducing your tone so that the person can move you and not feel any resistance. But it's a skill, right? It's something that you get better at. Good, and next time your feet are up in the sitting position, leave it and rest on your hands. And just once more, have your legs be active. Have them be the agent of their own movement, as it were. And how is that? What do you do with your weight as you bring up one and then the other? Maybe your weight goes back, or maybe it goes forwards, maybe it goes to one side, maybe it goes to the other side. Really see if you can track those really subtle changes of weight shift, because they're the result of a change of muscle tonus from one part of you to another. They're not accidental, the weight shifts. Sometimes they're superfluous, but they're not accidental. Well, unless you're falling. I guess that's the sort of ultimate accidental weight shift, isn't it? Okay, fall onto your back. And try and hit you on the floor. Fran, you're so mean. And has that funny little exploration around having legs being more active and less active, more passive, influenced the way you're lying on the floor, the way you experience your legs. So the way you experience your legs is a phrase I would not encourage you to use in a public class because it's a nonsense phrase. It makes sense to us, hopefully, but it's so generic and so non-specific for public. Again, your class that you know really well and that you've been working with for months, you can guide them into that kind of jargon, that kind of shorthand. This is very much a case of, keep a half an ear out for the way that we're teaching and know that the way we teach you is different to the way we would work with a naive public. Okay, roll your way up to sitting again. And this time, land so that your left leg is in front of your right. And have your hands behind you so that encourages you. Notice that how that encourages your weight to go backwards a little bit. So just feel that. Take a moment. We're being quite anal today, but I really want you to experience why we're doing certain things. Well, not necessarily the why. Well, no, experience it. It's not the intellectual why. That's okay. And that if you don't have any weight on your hands, feel how your weight comes forward and that changes your shape, which means your muscle tonus has changed, right? Something else has got a bit more excited. My computer's not very excited. Good, okay, and then finish with your hands behind you again and let your chin sink towards your chest bone. That can kind of hang there. And again, do it a few times. How do you let that sink? Do you just let it fall or do you slowly lower it? Hopefully you slowly lower it because it's quite precious. And then let it come to rest, if possible, or, sort of as close to resting there as possible. And with your head staying there, so it's in some kind of position of repose, bring your right shoulder forward and your left shoulder backward. And then return to neutral. And as you bring your right shoulder forward and your left shoulder goes backwards, what does your head want to do? What does it do? It might not want anything. What does it do without you noticing? So this is where you kind of have to open the door and peep around it to see what your head does without interfering with it, right? So that it doesn't know that you're looking at it. You're paying attention to it. Because as soon as it knows, it will start doing something different. So let's go through the possibilities that it could do. It could stay in space, exactly the same position, so the nose could still stay towards your belly, so your pubic bone, because your pubic bone's probably not moving a great deal. Or let's say the floor, the same point on the floor, because that certainly shouldn't be moving. So try that as a possibility. So it has the same spatial orientation. Or what's another possibility? The head could go with the shoulders, right? Is that what yours did? So everybody do that. Another possibility could be that it actually turns a little bit more to the right, so that orients a little bit more towards the right shoulder. And can you feel that that's actually, if your head stays in the same spatial orientation, it is actually moving relatively to the right compared to the shoulder? Feel that? Feel the sort of similarity? That taking your nose further to the right is just growing what it was doing if you kept it in the middle, with the shoulder turning underneath it. So there are three really common, and this is for you as ATM teachers, not for you as doers. That these are really three common permutations that we might add into an ATM. That you allow the head to go with the movement, you allow is keep it still, or it goes counter to the movement. So there's a little kind of formula for you to tuck into the back of your head. And now let your head do what makes the most sense to you. And that's a frustrating thing to say to people, right? Because they think that there's a right way to do this. Let me just say that the parameter is what feels easiest of those three. And now, while you continue to turn your right shoulder forward and your left shoulder back, could you start thinking first about the back of your right hip lifting up off the floor, hip joint. And how would that happen? Would the movement need to grow? Would there need to be some of this thing I've been hinting about, this weight shift? Right? So for something to lift off the floor, something else needs to take more weight. You're going to change that base that you're using for your support. At this moment, it's just the right hip lifting. So you're just going shoulders going to the right shoulder going forward, left back. So the turn is to the left, lifting up the right back of the hip joint. And does this influence what happens in your head? Is there something that your head can do that would make this easier now? And it might be that you're finding that your right ear comes a little closer to your right shoulder. You might find that. Don't feel obliged. Don't do it to please me, and try the opposite. You know I always get my lefts and rights mixed up. Don't believe a word I say. And allow the movement to continue to grow. Now with this idea that your left knee, the outside of your left knee could get a little bit closer to the floor. That would be part of this trajectory. That would be the next kind of milestone, kilometre stone. That's what you've got to love about the POMs. I've just been walking in the UK, and you know they say they're metric, but they've got this deal that everybody can still talk in miles. And what's that all about? You either are metric or you're not, really, aren't you? Am I just so black and white? It's extraordinary. Sorry? I am very black and white today. Charcoal grey, thanks. Miss Cleo. Yeah, don't you read you probably say that your socks are green. They're avocado. I know. Thank me later. And you can all thank me by lying down on the floor. They might, yes. Maybe they can. Maybe they can. Yeah, maybe that's it, Fran. Maybe that's it, that they are very adaptable and they can just use two systems, and it's me that's not adaptable. Yeah. So I was born in, feet and inches, as it were. I was at primary school when we changed to metric. So I am still 5'9", not 175 centimetres. But I am 175 centimetres. I know that. Maybe they're just bilingual like that. Maybe. Where did your attention go as you lay down? Into thoughts, into sensation, into feeling. I think that's one of the great things about Feldenkrais is that we also learn to differentiate these four things, so thinking, sensing, feeling and acting, so that we can still have the experience of them being interrelated, but not quite so blurred. So, thought becomes an action without us even becoming aware of it, or we can think about our senses, or we can sense about our feelings like we just did. It's a very interesting skill, awareness of having these things differentiated. So roll over, come back up to sitting. Your left leg in front of you in that tailor sitting. Resting in a gentle way on your hands. So if your hands are tweaking, think about how you can not commit so much weight to them. What that would mean in terms of something else might have to work a little bit, right? Yep. And again, let your head sink onto your chest, gently, softly. And start to take your right shoulder forward, your left shoulder back, and notice that as the movement grows, there is this kind of impulse that the weight could shift onto your left side of your pelvis and the right side could get lighter on the floor. And if that movement continued, then the outside of your left knee would go more towards the floor. And now maybe imagine not your hand, but some hand that doesn't offend you slides under your right buttock, so that right sit bone, and helps it up a little bit, just like you used your own hands to slide your feet forward and backward. So you get that sense of, I can get a bit of support. I don't have to work so hard. This could be a little bit more, I don't want to use the word passive because it sounds like you're being manipulated, but it could be a little bit lighter because I'm getting a little bit of help from a friend. And it just helps you to lift that sit bone, and the weight shifts more onto the left, back of the left hip joint, and a little bit forward, right, so that that left knee can come to the ground. And then next time you come back to the middle, quietly pick your head up and let it tilt backward a little bit and keep doing the movement. So that instead of your head being tilted forward, it actually is gently back. Now that is quite a vulnerable position, right? So just do it as much as you feel comfortable, because you really have to, change the tonus in the front of your throat, which is, that's one of our little soft underbelly things that we like to protect, right? So we don't like to expose our throat. Who knows what might come along? That's a bit phlegm. I was thinking wolves, but you can think phlegm. Yes. That's a dreadful metaphor, Susan. That's really bad. But anyway, just know that it just goes as far as you feel safe with your head back. It's the intention in the change of orientation that's important. Keep doing the same movement. Right shoulder forward, left shoulder back. And then where does your head change a little bit? Does it still, the right ear still want to go more towards the right shoulder, or has it changed? What's happening for you? Where do your eyes go? Next time you do the turn, have an intention that your right ear really is going to lie more in the direction of your right shoulder. Let's really clarify that. And what does that mean for the direction of your eyes? So when you're there in that rotated position, with that carriage of the right ear a little bit more towards the right shoulder, just open your eyes and see where you're looking. Is it where you thought you were? Your head in space. Did your internal sense of where your head was in space match the visual? And then just before you if you'd already lie down, that's perfectly fine. Those of you who are still doing it, just in the same movement, keep on doing that, and just a couple of times think that when you open your eyes, you're going to look in the direction of your right buttock, the one you're lifting. So how would that change the movement of your head? The head still is in that, and when you're in the middle, the head is slightly tilted backward. As if you're going to sneak a peek behind your buttock. Just seeing whose hand it is that's there, that's lifting your buttock up. Does that have a familiar feeling, that kind of corner of the eye peak? When that's clearer than it was, it doesn't have to be crystal clear, you can rest. Roll up to sitting. With your left leg in front of your right leg. Hands behind. And with your head tilted back, gently, softly, begin this movement of bringing your right shoulder forward and your left shoulder back. And again, the movement can grow so that you can feel the weight shift and the right buttock lifts off the floor, the back of the hip joint, which means that the right knee moves away from the floor and the left knee goes towards the floor, and you're breathing. And then as you get to the point where your right buttock is lifted and you have this sense that if you opened your eyes, you'd be looking in the direction of underneath your buttock, find a way for your head to slowly roll forward so that your chin then comes towards the chest. Instead of going back when you come to the middle, your head comes forward as you come back to the middle. And repeat that, reverse that movement if you like. So it's coming back, and that movement of returning your buttock to the floor actually brings your chin forward. So I'll say it again. So your head is tilted back when you're in the middle, and then you do this twist and arch forward, right shoulder forward. And as you have this orientation that your eyes are almost looking underneath your right buttock as it lifts, from there find a way for your head to roll forward, and you come back, everything comes back to the middle. And go gently and slowly. So these head rolling movements are demanding, right? You're changing the orientation of your head and using a trajectory that you might not be using a lot. So it might be a little bit perturbing. See how you can find this way of bringing your head to roll in. So you, in a way, throughout the movement of turning to the left and back, your head makes a half circle from being tilted back to being tilted forward. And maybe you could do the opposite now, so that you start off with your chin. This is the reverse movement. Some of you are doing it, some of you aren't. Just so everybody has a taste. Start off in the middle with your chin on your chest. As you rotate your right shoulder forward, left shoulder back, and you feel that weight shift and the right buttock elevates a little. You can allow your head to roll more so that you're looking under the right buttock as it lifts. And then as you come back to the middle, your head rolls back so that when you come back to the middle, it's tipped backwards. So it's doing the reverse arc, the same twisting, arching movement. So Larry calls these there's a lot of twisting, arching movements. He calls it twarching. Twisting and arching. Can you feel the twist and the arch? Not in this training. He comes out. He comes out to do advanced trainings. Yep. The mercurial Larry. He's a wordsmith. He loves language, so he's full of these bon mots, isn't he? Mm. Yeah, you've got a treasure trove of people to get to know over the time of your career. Unfortunately, everybody, well, not everybody, a lot of people love coming to Australia, so we're pretty blessed like that. But you can always go chasing them. They're quite happy for stalkers. Good. Leave it and rest. Rest on your back. Sorry? So good to know. Stalkers. And notice the influence of this pretty relentlessly one-directional kind of ATM. We've always gone to the left. Has it had an influence in the way that you're lying on the floor? So now I'll talk through a few little things while you're lying there so that you can replay it in your mind. And this is not, this is not a general public conversation. This is budding ATM teacher conversation, is so when your head is forward, so the front of your throat closes over, right? Those muscles are short, but they shouldn't be holding you short. They're not holding your chin there. Your chin should rest there. So they're passively, inactively short. And the muscles in the back of your neck have to lengthen to let your head come forward. Now, if your chin rests really heavily on your chest, then they probably switch off quite a lot. But if that's uncomfortable for you, probably have some activity in those the back muscles, but they're active when they're long, right? Think about like 2 sets of ropes at the front and the back. And then when your head is tipped back, it's the opposite. So those back muscles of the neck are shortened, but they're not contracted necessarily. They shouldn't be necessarily. They're just moved into a shorter position, right? The back of your head goes more towards the spine. And the front of your neck, those muscles and the throat have to lengthen. Now, some of you can just let everything go and your head actually lies quite heavily on your back, which means that those muscles have almost completely let go. But for most people, they can't let go enough. They can't get that length. So there'll still be quite a lot of activity and those front muscles will be long and active, which is a very unusual feeling for a lot of us, to have our throats open like that and those muscles long. It's quite a what would you say, vulnerable position, I think I used. So we do that in the context of a safe learning environment, like in here. This is the cat or the dog exposing their vulnerable underbelly. They trust you. And the same thing happens down the front of you. So if you flexed forward, then your tummy muscles can shorten, but then they're not necessarily pulling you forward. But some people do, like people who've got their tummy muscles switched on all the time, will hold their stomach in and have them contracted even when they don't need to. And of course, holding your tummy muscles in freezes your diaphragm. So when someone said yesterday the way they hold their breath is to freeze their diaphragm, the best way to freeze your diaphragm, apart from freezing your diaphragm, is to hold your tummy in. Keep a lot of muscle tonus in your muscle belly. Here's one of my favourite people. It is Glennie. Oh, shut up, she said. I got the mic, I can do what I want, Glen Hall. So roll your head a little bit left and a little bit right. And don't do it. That's a very descriptive thing to do. I invite you to not do it in a cursory kind of way, in a flip kind of way. How do you bring your awareness to that rolling? So that you can sense if this movement, which we've been doing only to one side, so your head's been going to the right, and to the right, and to the right, and back to the middle, has that had an influence on where it wants to go easily now? And it might not be to the right. It's not like you necessarily warmed it up. It might go to the left more easily. You don't know. Like, be an experimenter. This is experimental equipoise, right? You don't know what the answer will be. You're not predicting one way or the other. You're open to both tails, as it were. Or did maybe I leave that command too long and you'd already equalised the tonus, one side versus the other? So now that the difference, the influence of the lesson has been lessened. And again, notice the emotional tonus. Has that changed in you? That background tonus, or is there a new one fleeting across your screen, like frustration, you want to move, or feel more comfortable, you want to stay. How's that shifted for you or not? Roll one leg in and out. So you did this rotation. So you can keep them long, with the outward rotation where the outside of your legs lying more on the floor, and then quietly roll it in. Is this a little reminiscent of the FI exploration yesterday with Fran? And feel how the muscle tonus shifts as you do this rotation in your hip joint. Can you feel that idea of how you start using muscles in this kind of sequential way to roll in and in and in and in till your toes are pointing more towards inward, and then out and out and out and out, and how you can kind of pass the baton. That's my terms, you know, about doing a movement of rotation, and compare it to the left side. And feel how the activity moves around. The activity baton is passed on from one muscle to another. And then the lowering of the foot back out again requires the same kind of activity, but now it's that eccentric kind of letting go. If you can now take your toes up to the ceiling and then let them flop out. So that's different, right? There's a difference between a controlled lowering and a flop. Flop is a simply stopping. Feel the difference? It's a cessation, as opposed to now do the slow lowering. So you bring, it doesn't matter whether you do two legs or one leg, you can try both ways. Bring them slowly up to so the toes are pointing to the ceiling, and then slowly lower them back to their position of rest. So that's the controlled fall. Does that ring any bells from the talk on muscle tonus and activity? Drawing the foot up towards the ceiling, holding it there. Still, muscles are still working, so there's still increased tonus, and then slowly lowering it. They're slowly reducing tonus or activity length. Leave it and rest. Hands up who's still feeling quite asymmetrical. Yep, so for interest, there's probably about 6 people in the room who's still feeling quite asymmetrical. So if you would like to quietly sit up and run through a few things on the other side. Those who don't want to, don't need to, you can still lie down or you can sit and watch. And you can be free range. Just explore what you need to explore out of curiosity. So this is your internal authority, right? This is nothing now. External authority, me, is going to shut up. Thank God they all say. And your internal authority is going to do the needful, as some of my continental students say. Professor Susan, do the needful. I'm not a professor. They just like to suck up. Do the needful. Those of you who are exploring for the sake of it, maybe you can add another thing in. So we use the eyes on and off, as it were, in this movement. You could actually now think about that you're directing your nose in different directions, like you were going to smell something. Smell under your buttock. That's a bit weird. Or, you know, someone's baking and you're trying to find where the smell is in the air. So your nose is kind of, the trajectory of the head is not so much about sweeping your eyes around, it's sweeping your nose around. Because we sense smell through movement as well. We locate it by moving, right? So that we find out where the smell's coming from through having freedom of movement in the head. Otherwise, it just hits our noses and we don't know where it's from, right? So we turn our noses. Think about the way dogs and cats locate smell. They don't stand still. They sniff the air and then they turn around. So it could be your nose directing the movement, or it could be that you're hearing. And again, we use movement to locate the source of the sound. We use other things as well, but that's one way so that our brain can sense if the sound is hitting one ear a few milliseconds before it hits the other ear. And that tells us where the sound is coming from, or we compute where the sound is coming from. So maybe this movement could be, this arc of the head could be locating sound. Does that make a difference to the quality of the head turning? The quality of the twitching. And the hidden sense, our vestibular sense, obviously, is going mental with these rotations, working out where our head is in space. And coordinating our eyes if our eyes are open. So did you hear him go crazy listening to the sound above us? I mean, that's really interesting, right? When there's a moving sound and we're still. Thank you. Give us another opportunity. That's brilliant. And when you're satisfied, you can lie down. See for yourself the results of your little experiment. So they are having fun. Do you think they got somebody on it? My fantasy is that somebody's on a desk chair and they're being pushed up and down, having really fun. That's my fantasy. Grand piano, and you have a feather boa and you're reclining on it, and you're in an interesting twatch, because that's how you should recline on a grand piano, on the piano. Beautiful. Now, interestingly, that lesson is in the Amherst series that we're using, but I'm hoping at some level, even very unconscious, there are some reminiscences in that lesson from yesterday. So out of curiosity, I invite you to now go through the Uber play from yesterday. It's not the play within the play, not the dead bird one, but the dropping the knees coming up to standing lesson from the ATM chapter, and see if that clarification of the freedom of the head and the movement of the teleceptors through space helps or hinders the learning of the flopping the knees up to standing. So again, I'm relying on your memory of those little parts, but you've all studied that lesson well, right? So it's in your schema. So that you're leaning gently on your hands, your feet are standing, wide enough so that eventually both knees can come to the floor, one on the inside, one on the outside. And there's that feeling of the pelvis lifting and being lifted, right? You know, it's both. There's that weight shift onto one buttock. So the one buttock is very happy to take the weight, and the lift of the other side facilitates that. And then there's this invitation for the leg to swing around you. And the head is free, right? And the head free to orient. And the pelvis is free to keep moving. That's interesting. We've lost the thing on the floorboards. It's smoother. All right, I won't be distracted, sorry. Negotiating with your neighbours about who's going to occupy which space. This is where you need air traffic control. But it's self-organising, right? I'm not telling you, okay, now everybody do it in this thing. You just notice, be aware of what's around you for your own spatial traffic control. Could it be fun? Could you do it with flair? You don't have to. Don't feel obliged. And again, now think about, you know, is it you're taking your eyes up? Are you taking your nose up? You're taking your ears up? You're taking your vestibular system through a waltz? Maybe you're taking your taste buds up. If you're a lizard, you would be. If you're a gannet, you'd be just wrapping your tongue around your brain. Be too busy protecting your brain to be bothered with this tasting business. I wonder what your brain tastes like. If you're a gannet, do they even taste their brain? Ah, they wouldn't have taste buds on that bit. Begs the question, doesn't it? This multifunctional stuff, you know, it's very complicated. Beautiful. Okay, so walk around. So when my cat occasionally pretends he's a tiger and he escapes from our backyard and he goes around sniffing the air, maybe you've got a dog or a cat that does that, could you go around, they call it the community newspaper, don't they, for dogs and cats? Could you go around and smell the community newspaper? So it's not, you're kind of questing with your nose, right? So how free would your head have to be if you were smelling the community newspaper? You're working around what's happening in the suburb, what's gone down overnight. You go, oh, didn't realise that had happened. So instead of reading about Malcolm Turnbull, you're smelling him out. Oh. Or like really try and search for some smells. This is a bit foul, isn't it? But we're a little bit about smells, aren't we? A little bit judgmental about smells. Could you just be curious? And now could you walk around as if you're trying to hear something? Like really your attention is in the hearing and you're going to hear the community news. What's happening around the traps? Gossip. Right, there's a lot of rumblings from upstairs, there's buzzings, you can hear the people around you. All right, maybe shut your eyes. Whoa. And hear your way around the room. Would you freeze your neck or would you free your neck to quest with both ears? There's a noise. Locate the noise. How did you know it was over there? So Alan in his trainings does a whole day where people are blindfolded. Didn't you smell each other? No, that's nice, isn't it? So maybe with your eyes shut, you have to smell and hear, right? So yes, Alan does a whole day blindfolded. It's a very confronting day. It's hard for staff because we have to be the eyes and we have to help people to the loo and all this kind of stuff. But it's really profound. You know, and people I've seen people have real meltdowns around because their vision is so important to them, and it takes them to dark places, literally, or it can be very liberating, right? So we won't do it because it's challenging, but you can get a little taste of it. Excuse the pun. Now. And of course, you're all feeling the floor. Like I can see your attention in your feet. I can see it, I can see your feet becoming sensitive to the floor. And your weight shift has changed when your eyes are shut. See, you won't commit. You don't just freely chuck your weight around without the eyes, right? There's this negotiating with the floor. Don't worry, Karen, it's just the pajama boy. And how do you negotiate when you have an unexpected encounter with another species? You negotiate some more.
Yeah.
And notice, that this is, there is this kind of, it's fun, but it's kind of anxiety. What's your default when you're a little anxious? We didn't talk about this with the ATM boot camp, but I find it really interesting to track myself. What are my default behaviours when I'm anxious, when I'm nervous? What do I freeze in myself? Yeah. The care. Good, and then leave it and open your eyes and be fully open, as it were. So I see a lot of people who have quite poor sensation in their legs. So as soon as they're in the dark, they are almost immobilized. Right, and so I would say probably half the people that I see, and they're often mostly women, because this bugs women. I think blokes just put up with it. I'm not sure about that. Who are kind of getting into their 60s. They're probably, maybe diabetic, maybe not. So they've got some kind of neuropathy that they're quite detached from their feet. But they want to do something about it because they're feisty, fantastic people. They don't want to age with these compromises. They want to maximise their opportunities and comfort. So we do a lot of stuff around exploring senses, practicing sensing, building up their confidence in these hidden senses. All right, you done? Yeah. So let's have a morning tea break. It's 5:02-ish. So let's come back at 1:15. So it'll be the panel discussion.
So does that make a difference in neuropathy, or does it give them more?
Well, because there's two things going on. If you've got there is an issue with they're sensing their feet, but the less you sense, the less you sense. So there is also I think, my theory is,